Casey, the first question is the most direct. Has anybody been charged for the vandalism at the University of Washington in early May?
It's still an ongoing investigation, so there hasn't been a charging decision one way or the other.
Why hasn't anybody been charged?
Well, I think a lot of people wonder what the heck's taking so long, and also, will people be held accountable for the $1 million+ worth of damage? And the answer is yes, if there's evidence to do that. And a lot of people would look and say, you're in the building, there's a lot of damage, that's enough evidence for me. But it's not enough evidence under the law. You've got to prove under case law and the laws of Washington State, you've got to show specifically what each defendant did. And that's what takes so long to do the investigation is, you can't just make an arrest and bring it before a jury. You've got to have enough to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And what the law says and what a lot of people would look at and say, well, that's enough for me, are very different standards.
Weren't there people that were handcuffed by police inside that building at the time of the alleged crime?
There were, yeah.
And taken out of the building?
Yep.
So can't prosecutors say you were in the building at the time all of this went down?
Yeah, you can. But that doesn't mean that criminal trespass would hold up without additional elements. You've got to show that there was a dispersal notice and that it was heard and understood. There's other elements that I think to me and you or people watching at home would say, you really got to do all that, but it's what the law requires. And sometimes that's looked at as, prosecutors are being sticklers. But it's not that. It's that we need to be able to not only have the case be accepted by the court, but also hold up in court. And so that's why it's such a long process for UW police and for prosecutors to work together to make sure that there's that available evidence before the case gets filed, because then, if you don't have that, it gets thrown out of court right away.
So you brought up the question, will anybody be held accountable?
If there's evidence, yeah, absolutely.
Is there evidence? Is there video?
That's what we're working on now. Video, we haven't seen it from inside the building, but there's lots of video. I'm sure that there's other opportunities for video. And one thing that the prosecutor's office has offered is our team to work on search warrants. And so just because there may not be a camera inside the building doesn't mean that everyone's going to, just walk. There's other opportunities for video too.
So this is almost 3 months after the fact, May, June, July, into August. Can we read anything into that it's taking this long when there were people that were handcuffed on the site?
Well, just being handcuffed on site isn't enough for a felony charge to hold up in court. And a lot of people would look at that and say, oh yeah, it is. I know it. But when you look at the elements of what we have so far, we've got to make sure that not only the case can be fileable and accepted by the court, but also hold up in court too. And what the law requires is very different from what folks at home, watching parts of it would say, well, that's enough for me. And that's frustrating for people because, we don't want to see the UW damage like that. You don't want to see that great new building damage like that. And people who cause property destruction like that, whether it's the UW or anywhere, should be held accountable.
And there have been multiple meetings at this point between the prosecutor's office and the University of Washington about this, correct?
Yeah, just yesterday, the chief of our mainstream criminal division was with the UW chief of police and others from the UW walking through that classroom and the exact site in that building where the folks were arrested, working on the investigation at that scene. And so this is certainly something that's active. It's not on somebody's desk that's forgotten. And I think a lot of people might confuse, it's taken 3 months, you probably don't care about this, but that's not it. It's actually the opposite. The more that you look into it and want to make sure, both from the UW police side and from prosecutors, to make sure that you have the strongest case. If it wasn't important, police and prosecutors would just say, well, but that's not what's happening. You wouldn't have the chief of police and the chief mainstream prosecutor in that building yesterday working on, every week having meetings to say, okay, where are we now? And offering each of those services. You wouldn't have that if the case wasn't important. But that's still not, satisfying for people because they want to see results. But what I can say with certainty, and I'm sure that UW would say too, is that prosecutors and police are working to find as much evidence as possible to try to hold people accountable.
So the case is not closed?
No, the case isn't closed. Yeah.